I analyzed dozens of deals that were sold on the Empire Flippers marketplace, so you don't have to figure out how do you actually sell your business where you can sell it for higher than the average multiple. So if you look at businesses sold on Empire Flippers across deal size, business model, all the different types out there, the average sales multiple is right around 23x, which is not that great. But that also takes into account things like declining businesses, all that kind of good jazz too, because hey, we sell a lot of businesses here. But I wanted to shoot this video to try to demystify here, how do you actually sell for a higher multiple? Because sellers always want to sell for the most amount possible, and usually that amount is pretty unrealistic what they're saying. So I thought like, okay, let's help you out. If you want to sell for a premium exceptional multiple, the key thing you need to know as a seller is, why does your business justify an exceptional multiple? So how do we make our businesses exceptional? What do we do? Well, in this video, I am going to touch what drives these massive multiple differences from like the average 23x business to the 36, 40x, 50x businesses, and how you can do the same. I'm also going to talk about the 3 positioning strategies that I think consistently help you beat the average sales multiple. So make sure you pay attention. And if you're going to exit your business, you might as well go to empireflippers.com/sell and we can help you. We've made officially over 90 millionaires now. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully you'll be one of them too. All right, let's get into what goes into an exceptional multiple. So if you look at our data, if you look at premium businesses, so let's say over $1 million, businesses valued at over $1 million tend to have an average of 31.67x as their monthly multiple. Businesses that are valued less than 50K or really under 100K, they tend to be 19.38x multiple. So that's about a 67% gap. That's a big gap, and that's where we get that 23.67x. But if you have $1 million business, you don't want to sell for 31.6, you want to sell for 40. So how do you get there? And if you're underneath 100K, obviously you don't want to sell for 19x, you want to sell for like 25, 26x. So what do we do to give ourselves the exceptional multiples? Well, the first step is we got to understand what drives multiple valuations in the first place. And that really comes down to a few different factors. The first factor, and perhaps one of the most important, is scalability. Buyers pay you a lot of money for the future potential of the business, what is the future potential is going to provide to the buyer based on your historical cash flow. Now, they're not just buying pure cash flow plays. And at the lower end, I would say buyers do tend to focus more on cash flow, and it might be like a side hustle they're buying, something like that. But as you go up market, they're looking much more than just at cash flow. They're looking for businesses that can double in revenue without doubling costs. And they're also looking for businesses that have systems and processes in place that are scalable. So is your business scalable? That helps you justify a much more exceptional multiple, than if it's not scalable. Well, how do you know if it's scalable or not? Well, the question I always ask my sellers is, how useful are you to your business? If the answer is, I'm the linchpin of everything, well, probably not that scalable, because your real goal, if you want to sell for the highest premium valuation, is to be the most useless person in your company. The more useless you are, the better it is, because that will behoove the buyer to realize like, wow, this guy's really built a machine of leverage here. Doesn't even really require him. He's basically an absentee owner. And that can help you secure the absolute best multiple for your business, because that's what buyers want. Next is revenue predictability. So these are your classic subscription models, long-term contracts, SaaS, customer retainers, all that kind of stuff. But one thing that people don't think about when it comes to revenue predictability, it's about more than just having a subscription fee. I see a lot of SaaS founders and SaaS brokers. They talk about this all the time. Everyone needs a subscription, but that's just not realistic. Most businesses cannot support a subscription fee. I've seen it so many times where people try to put a subscription fee, say like a brokerage that would like charge the buyers a fee or something like that as their primary monetization model. Every time I've seen that, that brokerage becomes a discount broker. I've seen it so many times in this industry. And I've also seen other people try to apply subscription services to industries that just don't naturally do that. It's okay to have a business that doesn't have subscription. you can still hit revenue predictability even with one-off sales. Like if you look at Empire Flippers, we have some revenue predictability, even though we're technically an agency that does quote unquote one-off projects, right? Which is we help you sell your business or we help you buy a business. And once you do that, well, we got to go find another person, because usually you're not just going to go sell another business right away with us or buy another business right away with us, right? It takes time before you'll come back. So it's okay if you're selling a business that doesn't have recurring revenue. In that case, how you show predictable revenue is by having predictable pipeline. So your sales pipeline or lead pipeline, where you're getting this amount of people to your email list, and you know over time, each one of those email subscribers is worth X, right? So there's multiple different ways you can show revenue predictability. A lot of people, they just go to the lowest common denominator, which is also one of the hardest, which is creating recurring revenue. That's the dream, right? But they always tend to forget that a lot of that recurring revenue also has really high churn. So the dream doesn't actually pan out the way people tend to think there. All right, so you have revenue dependability, predictability. You also have operational independence. And this is what I was kind of going on about like how important you are to the business. Like this is a major factor, whether you're going to get a average multiple or a very high multiple for what you're selling. Because again, buyers don't want to buy something that relies solely on the seller. This is why you've seen me, if you followed me for any time, me kind of railing against personal brands for a while. I'm probably going to do actually full-blown video on that, because it's like a chip on my shoulder that like everyone needs a personal brand. I actually think that's a really bad advice for a lot of businesses to do. But when you go to sell your business, it's even more important that you're not reliant on you, like your own personal brand. There needs to be operational independence. Ideally, if you want the best multiple here, you want to have a management in place that is running the day-to-day job of, growing and maintaining the business, right? And you want to have clear SOPs, all that kind of stuff. The more we can show to the buyer, look at this wonderful machine of leverage I've created, the more that the buyer is going to be willing to pay you. So kind of a cousin to the last factor, factor number 4 is growth infrastructure. You can have this beautiful system, but if you don't have your infrastructure set up right, that means as you scale, like scalability there, as you scale, things start going awry. So you want to be able to show you have a good system for acquiring customers, a good system for fulfilling to those customers what they bought, for launching new products, and you have a roadmap of how you're going to be scaling operations, ideally driven by the past of how you scale the operations, while also predicting the problems that might come in the future. So for example, if you're running a marketing agency, it might be fine when you're brand new and it's just you, but you're doing everything for the business, right? Including fulfillment. You might be able to fulfill like 10 to 20 people a month and still not lose all your hair, right? But what about when you go to 40? What about 60? What about 100 clients? Your operations are going to have to change. So if you want to get a premium multiple, you need to build an infrastructure that you can then show to that buyer, hey, look, we actually got a lot more room for growth here. Once you like start pouring in the leads or, whatever you're going to do, there's like this amount of room for the company to grow. A good example of this is not really an Empire Flippers example, but I was reading another M&A book where this guy was talking about buying factories. And one of those due diligence questions he asked is, how many assembly lines do you have? What kind of shifts do you have available at the factory? Because if they had, say, 2 assembly lines and those shifts are filled with like 90% of uptime, where 90% of them are being used, then really the growth infrastructure of that factory is only about 10%, unless you really seriously rework that factory, right? I mean, you're just like, the laws of physics are stopping you from producing. You can't just open up like 30 more assembly lines, lickety split the moment you take over the business, right? And that will factor into the valuation. Doesn't necessarily mean just because you don't have this growth infrastructure that you're going to get an average multiple, but if you do have it and you can demonstrate to the buyer, all the more better. Because again, what do buyers want? They want to buy growth and they want to benefit from that growth. So you want to position your business in such a way that shows all this beautiful growth that is still untapped for the buyer to come into, and you just happen to build the foundations of that system already. Now, when it comes to all this stuff, you can kind of see that play out. If you look at the 3 main big businesses that Empire Flippers sell, you can see these multiples playing out exactly how I'm talking about. Like, if you look at content sites, which have been taking a pretty big beating the last couple of years, their average sales multiple right now is about 21.4x. Look at e-commerce stores, on the other hand, on average, they're getting 25.8x. So quite a big difference there already. If you look at software and recurring services, say like marketing agencies or SaaS businesses, you're really looking at 35x and up. So you can already see what I'm talking about here. The more you are able to build and control the full funnel of your business, the more valuable it will become when you go to exit that business. All right, let's talk about the 3 main positioning strategies you can use to get a premium multiple. First one, actually the first 2, both very, very simple. Won't take us long to go over. The first one is the ever tedious financial optimization. Most people just do not do this. I was working with a friend of mine, a multiple 7-figure agency. He had no financial optimization, no accounting system, nothing like that. He had a spreadsheet that was easily out of date. Like, this is bad news bears. If you want to sell your business for a high price and you show this spreadsheet that is easily outdated and could potentially be filled with errors, it's not tracked by any accounting system, you're not really going to build a lot of buyer confidence in your deal, right? So we want to build buyer confidence by having clean financials, showing steady growth, strong margins, because strong margins signal stability and the ability to weather bad storms, because you have thick enough margins to actually save and reinvest in the business. And all of this can justify a much higher multiple for you if you do this well. The other thing, so the second part of this, is operational documentation. Again, machine of leverage. All your SOPs, all your playbooks, all of this should be very processed out. And your goal with any SOP is that you can give it to basically, a capable, largely random person that doesn't know anything about your business, and they can follow that SOP with your infrastructure and do about 80% as good of a job as you. Like, that's all you're really aiming for. If you can do that, have these SOPs in your playbooks, it's kind of like the IKEA, how to build this furniture plant for your buyer. Very good sign. Well, again, you're building confidence in the buyer. Like, hey, you're not just like some random business held by duct tape. You actually have all these systems, processes, all that kind of stuff that built a lot of confidence, which again is what we need if the buyer is going to justify paying you a premium multiple. Now, the final bit is probably the trickiest of them all to do. This is something we can obviously help you to do at Empire Flippers. We've done it over 2,000 times at this point, but it is strategic positioning. Now, that's pretty vague. But strategic positioning, what I mean by this is you're really positioning your business as an investment and not just a cash flow source. This is not just something to give you escape from your 9-to-5 or travel the world or wherever. Like, this could be like a life-changing business, right? This could be a machine that you can double, triple, or quadruple and sell. And like, I've seen that happen. We've had a seller, he sold a $180,000 Amazon FBA business. The person who bought that business 22 months later is now selling it with us. I think his valuation is like 1.1 million, right? Pretty cool. That is a crazy investment. In less than 2 years, that buyer earned over $1 million, basically. That is crazy. So you want to position your business as something that can really level up that buyer, ideally, that can really fit into their portfolio and with what they're thinking. Now, most sellers make the mistake here where they want to sell on potential. And that is a massive mistake, because what is great potential in your head, when you say that to the buyer will often give you a worse deal. Now, the reason why is because the buyer's thinking like, well, if you're so confident in this business, like 10xing over the next 22 months or whatever, how about we just do an aggressive earnout and I'll pay you even more when it does it, right? They're not going to like that as much because they know that you're buttering them up, so they'll try to pay more. So that's not exactly what I mean when I talk about positioning this as an investment. Instead, often the better way to build this potential in a buyer's mind is if you know who the buyer is a bit, what their skills, what their background is, and what their goals are with the business, you can show them all the mistakes you've made with your business, all the failures, all the heartaches, that time you actually spent 10 grand on a Facebook ad that was going to a landing page that didn't work. Ask me how I know about that mistake. So like, all that kind of stuff, right? You can share this stuff with them. And often your mistakes are the opportunity for the buyer. Like, your failures is the buyer opportunity. So this is one of the best ways to have the buyer really build potential in their own mind. Like, they see that Facebook ad mistake, they might be an absolute Facebook ad ninja, right? They will never make that mistake in a million years. And they're secretly thinking like, wow, this guy Like those ads aren't that bad, but they're not that great either. I can certainly do way better. So they're selling themselves on your business. Now they're sloppy, having this life of like, they're looking at the business, wanting to buy it, right? So this is one of the best ways to position your business is by going through the mistakes and your failures, which honestly makes a lot of people uncomfortable because, hey, no one wants to go through that, right? No one wants to admit how wrong they were about something. It's like hard, but this is one of the best ways to position your business as a true investment. I was looking at another business, a friend of mine, it's a smaller business. He's paying about $15,000 a year for this one software. Now his business was probably valued around $200,000. So that $15,000 expense of his is a big chunk of his actual overall valuation that he's spending in expenses. But he could literally change that software over and save, I think $13,000 or $12,000 a year. And that $12,000 a year, you times that by 2 or 3x. Hey, he just increased the entire price of his business by like 30% or something crazy like that, right? This is what I mean. You want to be able to show these failures because that gets buyers excited. Like when a buyer saw that software expense, like, oh, dude, this is amazing, right? This is going to be great. Like there's profit right there in the P&L that I can just like change over software. This would be fantastic. So you want to be able to dive into that with your buyer. And here's a fun fact for you. When most sellers try to hide this, it is a losing battle because if a buyer is good at due diligence, they're going to find this stuff anyways. They're going to find out about your mistakes and they're going to ask you questions about it. That's the nature of due diligence, like to see what's wrong with the business so they can come up with a real offer. Because every business, I don't care how big, how small, how clean it is, every business has tons of problems and mistakes. It's the nature of the game. So those are the 3 positioning things. But I want to go over some other critical valuation mistakes people make, which is usually a mindset or just not understanding how the market works. So let's say we have 2 businesses making $10,000 per month. Now these businesses are not equal if one relies on manual labor and the other is automated. Again, scalability, right? Buyers pay for scalable, efficient models. Now another example, high margin businesses consistently get higher multiples. So you have a 60% margin operation, it's much more attractive than a 30% margin operation. And it might get a better multiple, even though the 30% actually is making more money overall. So that extra margin can often breed confidence in the buyer that, hey, if something goes wrong, it's okay because our margins are so thick, we can weather a few mistakes or a few downturns or whatever, right? The other thing to look at is 2 businesses making exactly the same amount of money might get completely different valuations, even if they're in the same business model in the exact same niche. So this is something that actually happened on Empire Flippers. We had a business, I think it was worth like $900,000, and another business that ended up being worth closer to like $350,000. But they were making almost the exact same money, same business model, and same niche. Now, the person who got the lower valuation, he was not happy. Right? He was like, why would this be? This is crazy. People only buy businesses for cash flow. And he was completely wrong. People don't just buy businesses or don't just value businesses based on cash flow. They also value it on things like goodwill, which usually comes down to brand. So in this situation, that seller got the lower valuation. His website was like, not his actual website, it's just an example, but bestredblenders.com. And the other person, also not a real website, was called Kitchen Hero. Now, if you look at these 2 businesses, would you spend close to $1 million on Best Red Blenders? Or would you spend closer to $1 million on a brand called Kitchen Hero? Like most people, it's probably the second one, because the second one has a much more scalable, much more brandable name versus just being an SEO domain, right? So this is what I mean. Branding comes into effect as well. So you often want to have the scalability combined with premium branding. So if you're building with an exit in mind and you want to justify an exceptional multiple, you need to make sure you have a justifiably exceptional business. That's how you get these big multiples. So you want to have a scalable model with the growth infrastructure, all the systemic operations. You want to maintain premium margins, and you also want to have a really, really good brand. So keep that all in mind. Now, if you want help with all of this, you are in luck, because us at Empire Flippers, we have sold over 2,400 businesses, and officially, at the time of this recording at least, we have hit 90 millionaires we've created at the moment of exit. That means at the moment that they sold on the Empire Flippers marketplace, we sent out $1 million at minimum to their bank account. Pretty cool, right? We will love to do that with you too. You can go to empireflippers.com/sell and you can get a free valuation from us. You're underneath no obligation to sell with us, and we'd be happy to help you to see what we can do. That said, I'll see you in the next video.